Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. We're only the strongest roots see the light. Brought to you by Botánica candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please subscribe to our channel or join our membership program. What's up, Phil?
Hey, happy Sunday, everybody. I'm glad to be here. And don't forget, we have a membership program where we offer so many great things. I can't even discuss it today, but if you haven't been a VIP, you missed out on a huge announcement.
Yeah, you got to get in there so you
Gotta
can
get
get the
in there.
exclusive news, man, because VIPs are family. We're all family here. We're all community, but our VIPs have a special place in our heart. They help us so much, and they provide so much feedback and support. We appreciate you guys for all that are in or are to be. So
what are we talking about today?
today we are continuing with our 𝗀𝗍𝗍 series with the second 𝗀𝗍𝗍 of Ifa, or 𝗀𝗲𝗹𝗁 of Ifa, Baba Oyekun Meji.
So when you say Mejis, there's what? 200, right? 200
So
something?
in total, the signs of Ifa are 256. But to be able to get to 256, we have to multiply 16 by 16.
Oh, God.
So the original 16 signs are the 𝗀𝗍𝗍, because when we look at them, the right side of the sign looks just like the left side of the sign. For example, 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗶 is all ones on one side, 4 ones, and then 4 ones, right? So Baba Oyekun Meji is 4 twos and then 4 twos, and so on and so forth as we go forward. But that's why they're known as 𝗀𝗍𝗍, because they're twins, because they on the right side resemble the left side and so forth. From them procreating with each other in this divine soap opera of celestial geometry, we get the other 240 combinations, thus making the grand total of 256.
Got it. Okay. All right.
So going right to that, Baba Oyekun Meji is a very interesting sign because it is recognized as the most beautiful of all the signs of Ifa. And in Baba Oyekun Meji, there is a pataki where all of the 𝗀𝗍𝗍s went for divination, right? And to see who was the most attractive, right? And all of them kind of pled their case, and Oyekun Meji said, well, I'm the most attractive. And they said, well, why? And he said, well, if you look at 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, he's all skinny and like a needle. And when you look at 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, he's thin because he's all ones. And then he was like, well, Baba Ifa Meji has a fat head and swollen feet. And he started sunning everybody and, basically trolling all the other 𝗀𝗍𝗍s, or roasting them. And they said, well, why are you so beautiful? He said, I'm twos on all sides. I'm perfectly symmetrical and beautiful. I'm tall, I'm handsome, I'm all these different things. And, 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗏 said, well, you make a pretty good case. And he was identified as the most beautiful 𝗃𝗲𝗍 in all of Ifa due to his symmetry. And it was because of this that really the epic of creation is seated within this 𝗃𝗲𝗍, even more so than 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏, because technically Baba Oyekun Meji is the oldest sign of Ifa, even though he is not the most senior sign. Well, people are like, well, if he's the oldest, how did he lose his position? That's why you watch this podcast.
There you go.
So Baba Oyekun Meji had an appointment with his father, 𝗃𝗏𝗏, to receive the hat of light. And, you hear sometimes the stories of Ifa, like the hat of light. Yes, that's what it says in the scripture. Some say it was the hat of light. Some say it was the key of light. But he was basically going to occupy the position of the holder of the sun and bringing light to humanity. He was going to be the Messiah of, this epic tale. And he was so happy that he got belligerently drunk and passed out. So he had a younger brother named Baba Ifa who walked in, who was actually supposed to receive the position of darkness or the moon. And he went to go see his brother so that they would arrive together punctually to be able to receive their positions and begin, existence. 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏 was a very punctual guy, believe it or not. And when he got there, he saw his brother completely drunk. And he saw him with the hat. And he said, if this guy's not there on time, none of us are going to have a life. So 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏 picked up the hat, put it on, and arrived at the appointment. And at that moment, God looked and said, you're not Oyekun Meji? He said, I know, Father. He said, all right, you explain to me after, but the job's yours. And at that moment, the Big Bang happened and light expanded. And Baba Ifa went from being the youngest sign of Ifa, or number 16, to number 1, right? So when 𝗃𝗏𝗏 went to him and said, hey, good job, but your brother's not going to like this. And he said, well, Baba, to be honest with you, I'm not trying to snitch on nobody, but he got so excited with what you told him that he's passed out and drunk on the floor. And he said, oh, okay, well, that's definitely not somebody we can, entrust with the well-being of humanity. So I'm happy you did it. And I'm going to banish him now. And 𝗍𝗶𝗍 said, please don't punish him. Success is hard to handle for some people. So being that he has a different character than me, where I'm punctual and organized and, disciplined, he's a little more, lofty. He's a little more abstract. He's also exhausted most of the time. Give him the moon. Give him the night. And Olodumare looked and said, unfortunately, no one is going to ever recognize your compassion, but I'll always know that you were good to your brother and you didn't steal anything from him. Because unfortunately, 𝗍𝗶𝗍 is always seen as a traitor, which really isn't fair, because a lot of the moments that he's seen as a traitor, whether it was with Oyekun Meji or Ofun Meji, which unfortunately you have to wait till the 16th episode of the Mejis to hear that story, he was actually trying to help, but 𝗍𝗶𝗍 has a thing that, basically speaks of divine justice, where you can't always help people, and if you do, you might not always be seen as a hero. So at that moment, Baba Oyekun Meji woke up and saw darkness and realized he had missed his opportunity, and he kind of always hated his brother, even though low-key he appreciated him, because if not, he would have been completely banished. But at that point, Baba Oyekun Meji became the king of darkness, right? Oyekun Meji is an Odu that speaks of everything that is nocturnal. From the moon, it's also known as the Odu of the vampires, or people with, I believe it's, hemoglobin issues, hemophilia, all these different things. It speaks about everybody that was nocturnal, everything that is nocturnal. That is completely under his domain. That's why if you notice, the sun comes out punctually and the night kind of drags on, because it's kind of reflective of their two characters, right? But from the very beginning, this Odu teaches us that we need to kind of reiterate what 𝗍𝗶𝗍 has. We need to be more punctual. We need to be more organized. But it does have a caveat where a lot of things happen at night, or maybe beneficial at night. So you kind of, with this Odu, have to know how to balance your life, because there are going to be certain beneficial things that you're going to do when the sun goes down, right? But these three signs, Baba 𝗍𝗶𝗍, Baba Oyekun Meji, and Baba Oragun or Ofun Meji, were actually present at the dawn of existence, which each of them playing a role. 𝗍𝗶𝗍, the light, Oyekun Meji, the darkness, and they say Ofun Meji provided the combustion or explosion for the Big Bang and kind of the settlement of the cosmos. So it's really interesting stuff. But Oyekun Meji and Oragun never trusted 𝗍𝗶𝗍 because of it, right? There's so many pataquis here, and there's so much really fabulous information, but I'd like to take it back to the beginning, because even though we stated this pataki in a recent interview we did, I think it's really important to go into now, because it really provides the basis for our faith. Oyekun Meji speaks of a scenario where there was a family in heaven, and there was a father, a mother, and there was a child, and the child's name was 𝗍𝗏, right, which is a very important name within our mythology. And this child was a little bit peculiar. He wouldn't talk. He was very reserved. He may have certain symptoms of things now that we're able to identify that back then we might have just seen as stubbornness within a child. And being that he wasn't, vocal and things like that, his parents actually started hitting him out of frustration. And every time they would hit him, he would say or mumble a different word that really wasn't tangible to them. Like the first time they hit him, he said the word Oyekun, right? The next time they hit him, he said Iwori. And there's various, versions of the order and whatnot, depending on the story. I said it differently the other time. But when he got to the 16th hit, he said the word Ogbe, right? And when Ogbe happened, he actually was going to perish. Like, he became critical from the hits he was receiving. And his parents quickly realized, like, oh my God, we hit him too hard, but he was already dying. And once that was done, he told his parents, because miraculously, when he's about to die, now he's talking. He says, what you've done was part of prophecy. Don't beat yourself too much up over it. Just, when my brothers come and more children come, understand that everybody has a different trajectory in life, and everybody has different developmental stages and purposes. He said, bury me, and whatever comes from it, utilize it to be able to communicate with me. And when they buried him, from his grave grew the great oil palm, or the 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍, or the 𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗏, which is the palm tree which we harvest the 𝗃𝗍𝗍 seeds from, to be able to perform divination. So when the 16 seeds fell, as the roots descended from heaven to earth, kind of preparing for creation, the father picked it up and started playing with them. And he started marking ones and twos, and there we go. We have the Mejis of Ifa, right? This is one of the Odus where Aluking or Oluking Ifa was born, and that means I hit Ifa. Olu, I hit King Fa, the seeds of Ifa. And it's where 𝗍𝗲 first manifested. And when we look at Orunmila's name is Orunmila, which means in heaven I find my destiny, or I find 𝗍𝗲, which is basically the ancestral spirituality that is present in heaven, right? And ultimately he became Orunmila when he was born on earth. That's why the Babalawo does not come into trance, because we become influenced by this spirituality known as 𝗍𝗲, right? So all of that is present here. Far before the 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗲, far before the shell, far before anything, this played out in heaven. Now, with this now occurring, we can look at and see how even from before existence or in the darkness and all these different things, life was starting to prepare itself to basically be born, right? So when all of this occurred and all the Orisha or the Irumole start manifesting in heaven, it's time for each of them to start going down from heaven to earth. And, the only one that went for divination before doing this was Orunmila. And Ifa told him with the Odu of Baba Oyekun Meji to perform sacrifice and to not run, right? To move in a very calm, collected fashion, but to avoid running, which is actually a taboo in this sign. And he was like, okay. But what he didn't realize is when all the other Orishas started going down, a huge torrential rainstorm started. And the rain was falling on them and all these different things. And they started running to avoid getting wet. So where did Eshu run to? He ran to the woods or the four corners. Where did Shango run to? He ran to the royal palm tree. Where did Oshun run to? She ran into the river. When Orunmila descended upon earth, he saw that it was raining and he didn't run. So he said, well, I'm going to get wet. And he started walking and walking and walking and walking. And he arrived at a home. And when he arrived at the door, they said, who are you? He said, my name's Orunmila. I'm a Babalawo. I come in peace. I'd really love a towel, some dry clothes, and maybe some food, which was pretty commonplace within Yoruba culture to be hospitable like that. So when he entered the home, they asked him, well, what do you do? He said, well, I perform divination. I can make things happen. And he paid them back via divination, and great things started happening to them. And they said, we don't ever want you to leave. Like, please live with us. You don't have to work. You don't have to do anything. Just do Ifa work. And we'll tell other people about you so you can have savings and all these different things and all this stuff. And that's basically how he lived his life. He lived for free. And that is why in this Odu of Baba Oyekun Meji, we're not supposed to run in the rain. It's actually a huge faux pas within Ifa. And that's why ideally we shouldn't be getting wet with rainwater. But Oyekun Meji says why people shouldn't run in the rain, because when you look at the other Orishas, based on their hysteria from running in the rain, they actually ended up outside of the house, where Orunmila is the only Orisha that his natural state of being is inside the home. You can go to the river and find Oshun. You can go to the palm tree and find Shango, four corners Eshu, or 𝗵𝗸𝗏 in the mountain. But if you ever want to find Orunmila, he should be within your home. That's why everybody is meant to receive hand of Ifa. And that's also why Orunmila does not share a throne with anybody. Like you see a bunch of people now, they'll do a drumming or things like that, and they'll put other Orishas in Ifa's trono. Oyekun Meji says Orunmila doesn't like to share his space from that aspect. He likes to be alone because he was the only Orisha that really did that. Of course, he had to kind of deal with Eshu because he goes at the front. Maybe Oshun can get away with it. I don't know. It's all interpretive. But Oyekun Meji says Orunmila likes to be alone when it comes to moments like that, ideally. So you're already seeing this epic of 𝗍𝗲, Ifa came down, all of these different things, and things are starting to manifest, right? Baba Oyekun Meji has a lot of really great information, especially when referring to like things that are very like trenched in antiquity. Other spiritualities, one of the ones that it actually speaks about the most is Judaism. And in this Odu is the famous story of 𝗀𝗶𝗱𝗏. And it speaks of this character or personality in heaven who went for divination, and the Odu of Baba Oyekun Meji was revealed, where Ifa told him to perform sacrifice so that he would have a famous life on earth and be remembered forever.
Isn't that Jesus?
Yeah. And when 𝗀𝗲𝗃 came down after doing the sacrifice, he was born into, a Hebrew family, Jewish family, however you want to refer to it. The famous story on the top of the temple, all of those different things. And eventually he made his way back to Orunmila, they say after 33 years. And when divination was performed, Baba Oyekun Meji was revealed again for him in his personality of 𝗀𝗃𝗃. And Ifa told him to perform sacrifice with a goat to 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏. And he chose not to do it because he said, I worship one God, my God the Father. And 𝘃𝗶𝗱 kind of snickered at him, saying, everybody kneels to me, even your father. Baba Oyekun Meji is one of the Odus that says why you can kneel in front of 𝗃𝗏𝗏 and the warriors, as opposed to 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗏𝗏, which says you shouldn't, but that's a whole different, theme. But when 𝗀𝗃𝗃 persisted in not doing it, 𝘃𝗶𝗱 said, well, you're going to fall. And what he did is he corrupted the mind of Judas. Judas betrayed Jesus. They caught him in 𝗃𝗏𝗏, and then they took him prisoner. But when they took him prisoner, his mother Mary, who was the one who took him to Orunmila originally, being that she was an Ifa practitioner, they say, they did divination again. Baba Oyekun Meji was revealed again, where Ifa said that he needed to perform a head washing to be able to take away the negativity that he had incurred due to 𝘃𝗶𝗱's wrath. And his mother was like, well, let's go get the herbs now. I'll pay for it now, whatever it takes. And he said, we can't because the herbs sleep at night. And that's where 𝗀𝗃𝗃 comes from. 𝗃𝗃 meaning herbs and 𝗃 meaning sleep. And because they weren't able to do the piece of work in time, Jesus perished. And right after that, 𝘃𝗶𝗱 exited Judas's brain, and being that Judas couldn't understand why he had betrayed the man he loved the most, he took his own life. So it's a really epic story, and all of it is present in Baba Oyekun Meji. It's interpreted that 𝗀𝗃𝗃 is Jesus. We really don't know, but the paperwork states it. I guess we'll never know, but it is interesting, right? I mean, now, mind you, when I say names like Judas and Mary and things like that, it's just to put names to the archetypes of the story, but it is uncanny how they reflect. I mean, even when you look at other Odus and some of these biblical stories, it looks literally like they took an African story and just applied other names to it.
Yep.
That might have been what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that happens a lot.
Yeah, like as far as the appropriation and things like that, there's so many times I look in the comments and they're like, oh, that sounds like the story of Job, or, what about this story in Greek mythology? Africa was around before all of it.
Yeah, this is 2,000 years older.
Yeah, no, definitely much more. And but that's the story on 𝗀𝗃𝗃 there. There's a really beautiful story as well that I think should be mentioned as well. And Baba Oyekun Meji, it speaks heavily of the Orisha Oshun, right? And Oshun here actually innovated divination with water. And she would have a bowl of water, which is now manifested as the bóveda espiritual, which Baba Oyekun Meji speaks heavily of spiritism, 𝗃𝗃𝗃 rites, all of that. Some people say 𝗃𝗃𝗃 was born here. She would do divinations with bowls of water and things like that. And she was very, very sought after. But there was a man who was attracted to her, and his name was Osang, right? And Osang wanted to see how he could court Oshun, but he wanted to act like he was a client first. So he went for a reading, and Oshun immediately felt off when he walked in the house. And they did the reading, and Osang disregarded what Oshun said and tried to, interact with her, be intimate with her. And she was disgusted, and she said, get the hell out of my house. But he was greatly insulted because he had revealed himself to her, crudely, and she wasn't impressed, which seems to be the going story. And he was so insulted by her not reciprocating his advances that he actually did witchcraft to her and left it in her home.
Oh.
Some people say somehow the rhino was utilized in that witchcraft. This is the Odu of the rhinoceros as well, where actually rhinos first started getting poached and things like that for their horn. They say that Osang used to do witchcraft with the rhinoceros. Neither here nor there. Upon leaving, Oshun lost her eyesight. And because of it, she wasn't able to attend to herself or leave or anything like that. So after a week, people are like, man, is that lady dead? And a gentleman in the village named Babalawo went to check on her. And when he went inside, all he found was squalor. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't drunk anything. She hadn't bathed. Like, it was just horrible. And he said, what's going on? She said, I read this guy. After he left, I lost my eyesight, and I haven't been able to do anything since. Like, please help me. So he actually had to help her bathe. He had to help her use the bathroom. He fed her, all of these different things. He cleaned her up and he said, I don't know what to do here, but let's go visit Orunmila. And when they went there, the divination was performed. Baba Oyekun Meji was revealed, revealing that Osang had performed witchcraft to take away Oshun's eyesight, which was the same thing that she saw his member with, and wasn't impressed. And he basically recommended that she needed to initiate into Orisha to be able to save herself and her health. Baba Oyekun, or Babalawo actually provided the funds, they say. He paid for it just because, she was not in a state to be able to find the money or anything like that. And Oyekun, or Babalawo, as well as Orunmila, walked her into the room of Orisha, where she was able to do her process, and apart from that, save her health and her eyesight. And due to the gratitude that Oshun had for Babalawo, and also recognizing he was a very good-looking man, they actually got married, and they started a spiritual practice together, and they became very lucrative, right? But Baba Oyekun Meji states why no one is meant to arrive at the room of Orisha without having Orunmila received. There's a big reason why I mentioned this story, because what we'll have, people will reach out to us and be like, hey, I want you to identify our guardian Orisha based on a Bahala. And for the people that have inquired about that, I don't do that. And the reason I don't do it is because the majority of people find out the Orisha and never come back to receive Orunmila. They go running to do Orisha and then we never hear from them again, which is neither here nor there. But I don't want to waste Orunmila's time. So if you want your guardian Orisha revealed via Orunmila, you receive him the same way Oyekun Meji says we should. And everything turns out lovely. But when we analyze this pataki, Baba Oyekun Meji is where the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 was born. It speaks of, unfortunately, when the rhinoceroses were hunted down for their parts and utilized, whether it's in holistic medicine, witchcraft, black market, etc. It's very taboo. It speaks of the importance of spiritually developing, because had Oshun not had that sixth sense, she probably wouldn't have survived that week until Babalawo got there, and ultimately them taking her to the room of Orisha. So it's a very key concept in this Odu that the person needs to have Orunmila before initiating into Orisha. So super, super key.
Okay.
Baba Oyekun Meji, being that he was the most attractive looking, he had some pretty good habits as well to be able to maintain his physique and his appearance.
Do you think better looking than was it a 𝘄cie or was it the other one? Inlay.
Well, here's the thing. Inle is like an Orisha, and Oyekun Meji is like a sign. But the thing about it is Oyekun Meji is DNA. So it could be literally any Orisha that's mentioned in the story. Because that can be pretty confusing. Well, where are the signs and where are the Orishas, right?
Yeah.
For example, all of the Orishas that are mentioned in Padakis within an Odu were that Odu. So Babalawo was Oyekun Meji, Orunmila was Oyekun Meji, Oshun was Oyekun Meji.
Okay.
But if you look at the story where Inle was the most beautiful out of all of the Orishas, it was Iroso Tualara. It was 𝗀𝗏𝗄𝗏. That's the ones where in that manifestation or incarnation is where he looked like that. So that way it's because it can get convoluted very quickly, because between signs, Orishas, and names, it's like who's who and what's what. But that's how you kind of differentiate them, if you can kind of have them in a different mental space visually.
Got it. That makes sense.
So he had pretty good habits, but to be able to get to those habits, he went through some hurdles. So Shango and Eshu were having a debate. Eshu was a fisherman, and he had fish, and he would eat fish all day, but he felt like something was missing. Shango would eat yams all day, because he would harvest them and things like that. And they were like, I feel like something's missing, but they were having a debate saying, no, fish is better, no, yams are better. So they went to visit Orunmila to kind of come to a conclusion, and Orunmila said they're perfect together. The most perfect diet based on Ifa says fish protein and tuber carbohydrates. So when they started consuming both of them, they noticed that they weren't deficient in any of the areas that they felt weak in, and they started consuming both together. And because of it, till this day, the fish, whether it be the catfish or anything, is a very big part of the Yoruba diet. And obviously the yams can't be overstated. I mean, they're just the yam with everything. It's either that or the 𝗃𝗏𝗏. And because of it, human race, based on, Eshu's, fisherman practice and Shango's farm, they were able to start feeding everybody. And because of it, we're able to still be here till this day. It is interesting because when you look at the biblical story of Jesus on the hill, with the fish, where he was able to multiply the fish and the bread and all those things.
Yeah.
It's basically the same type of food that's identified in the story, and this Odu speaks about all the things that have to do with Christianity or Judaism. So that is an interesting concept as well.
Okay.
So it speaks of that, as far as fitness and dietary needs and things of that nature. There's so much information in Baba Oyekun Meji. Another really interesting part, it speaks of when 𝗀𝗏𝗃 first learned how to write, right? And he actually introduced things like calligraphy and written language and all of these different things. It speaks of that, where basically 𝗀𝗏𝗃 was looking for a way to communicate, because Oyekun Meji has actually seen the Odu of great communication. And this Odu is why the Orishas understand everything in any language, because they don't communicate via words, they communicate via emotion. So that's one theme. And then you look at the story of 𝗀𝗏𝗃 learning how to write and things like that. He was learning how to communicate with his people and whatnot, but he needed something to be able to write it in or to express, or language and things like that. And he was able to manifest it. Really interesting, because when you look at concepts like the Tower of Babel and things like that, seen as biblical, those same concepts are here, where people didn't know how to communicate or express themselves. But once they did, humanity was able to progress. There's also another key concept when it comes to communication here. In this sign, Eshu became the great communicator, or the great translator, right? Where once again, people weren't understanding each other, and they were looking for somebody to provide a medium point to be able to, basically carry messages and thoughts and things like that. And Eshu presented himself, being that he was available, and they made offerings to him, and he was able to translate the thoughts and desires from the human beings to the Orishas, and that ultimately translated between human to human as well. So it's an Odu of communication. It's also an Odu where Isang Egungun was born, or Egungun in general was born. Baba Oyekun Meji is seen as the director of the funeral rites. He's seen as the director of the afterlife. All of these things. They say that his personal assistant for the funeral rites is Baba Oyekun Bika, where all of the offerings to Egungun, absolutely everything that has to do with that priesthood or that cult, manifested here, where some people will go as far to say he came down in Oyekun Meji, even though there's another version in the Odu of 𝗵𝗶𝗍𝗶, right? But when we talk about Egungun, as far as Isang Egungun, the stick of Atori manifested in Baba Oyekun Meji, and it was identified as the oldest stick in history. So they were trying to create an icon to be able to worship Egungun, and they really didn't know what to confection it out of. So they visited Orunmila. This Odu was revealed, where Ifa said, if Egungun represents the ancestors, we need to find something that represents antiquity, or that which is ancient, or was there at the dawn of time. And they said, well, the oldest stick that we have is Atori, or the hibiscus in the New World. And he said, well, that will be the one that we use. And what he did is he took the sticks, and he took 9 of them, representing each of the spiritualities that, manifest Egun. And he incorporated the feathers of Abe, Aluko, and 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗶, which are, the Turaco birds, the red and the blue one, as well as the African gray red tail, the red parrot feather from the tail. And basically, consumed it or covered it in red cloth, which was actually gifted to him by 𝗀𝗏𝗃, his father/stepfather, along with cowrie shells. And this is how the icon manifested here in Baba Oyekun Meji. There's also another version of this story in Baba Osa Meji. But the key aspect is what it was constructed out of, and it was that stick, which was identified as the elder stick, which was Atori, which is ironically the same stick that is utilized when the Egungun masquerade comes out in Nigeria or Cuba or wherever they do it. I think I even saw one recently in Harlem. They had a festival. And they use that stick to be able to guide Egun through the streets, because it's the only stick that Egun recognizes. It's also the only stick that doesn't hurt him, because the Atori stick is really incredible, because you can bend it in half and it won't break. So it's actually one of the most flexible woods you'll ever interact with. And when it hits you, it'll leave a mark momentarily, but it won't break skin. So it's the one that he was able to identify is able to discipline without harming. So all of that is in Baba Oyekun Meji.
Nice.
When we talk about this Odu, like I said, so much information. Baba Oyekun Meji has to be one of the most extensive. It was also one of the ones I enjoyed reading the most. I spent about 2 months on it. But when you look at themes like Egungun, when you look at themes like all that it has to do with Shango, it really is very profound and just has enough information to keep everyone satiated. There's even a story in Baba Oyekun Meji where it speaks of the palm tree, once again going back to the king palm, where when the palm tree was growing, people were very jealous of it because they realized that, it was very grandiose and was going to have a great destiny and really accomplish great things. They wanted to be able to kind of, hide him or not allow him to progress. So what they did is they covered him in a metal bowl. And because of it, he wasn't able to grow and grow and grow. So Orunmila realized this and saw that this was an injustice, and he performed divination for 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, as he was known, or the palm tree. And it was identified that he needed to remove the cover to be able to sprout up and provide all the blessings that all of them were going to benefit from. And when they did that, the palm tree sprouted up and it started releasing the king fruit on earth. And because of it, they were able to perform divination and initiations and all these different things. And because of it, we still have a spirituality till this day. So one of the most key plants, it has a lot to do with vegetation as well, whether it's the 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗏 stick or whether it's the king palm or the palm tree or the royal palm tree, all of these things, all right here in Baba Oyekun Meji. When we look at this Odu as well, it speaks of various Orishas, but one of the things that Baba Oyekun Meji has to be very careful with is to always be careful with alcohol consumption. There is a story here. When we look at the first story where Baba Oyekun Meji became inebriated and ultimately lost his opportunity to be king of the world, there's another one here where it speaks of two brothers, right? And the two brothers, one of them went for divination, where Ifa told him not to become inebriated or spend the night at other people's homes, or to, over fraternize with his sibling because negative things could happen. But he didn't listen. So he chose to go to a party at his brother's house. They chose to drink a little bit, and then he ultimately fell asleep. But what he didn't realize is that his brother owed money to Ogun. So Ogun that night got tired of having a debt and decided to run up in Oyekun Meji's brother's house. And not really being able to see, being that the brothers were sleeping together in the same bed, one on each side, they were twins. So he said, oh, this is the guy I'm looking for. And he killed him and he dragged him out of the house. And it was the wrong brother. It was the one who didn't perform at Bo and the one who didn't listen. So another story from Oyekun Meji that kind of shows the importance of the obedience to Ifa. And, when we look at how Oyekun Meji also is the godfather of 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗏 in the Erindilogun, and when we look at 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗏, it means two men or two lands that are meant to be separated. It may come from this pataki right here, where Baba Oyekun Meji told one brother not to be around the other because he might suffer circumstances and repercussions that had nothing to do with him, but due to being too emotional and not listening to Ifa, he ultimately transpired. Baba Oyekun Meji is an Odu that speaks very heavily about the importance of respect. When we look at Yoruba culture, as far as elders and, protocol and things like that, it can't be overstated. There always needs to be a sequence when it comes to interacting with people that are older than us and giving them the proper respect. But in Oyekun Meji was where the youth didn't want to pay the elder masons for their seal of approval on their buildings because they felt like they had mastered all the skills and they didn't need to, pay them, and they wanted to keep the money, and, they didn't need that experience. So the elders said, hey, that's your decision. So what they ended up doing was they started building a edifice on sand near the beach because they wanted a nice beachfront Malibu property. And when they started doing that, Olodumare saw, Eshu saw the disrespect, all these different things. So what ended up happening was Olokun ended up washing away the castle. And this was a big issue because that building was meant for the king. And before the king found out, they went running back to the elders and said, hey, we built a house on sand and it got washed away. What do we do? And the elders were like, well, you can pay me and I'll tell you what you did wrong. And they told them you can't build a castle on sand. And they built it on firm ground, even though it was a little further from the ocean, but it was a very grandiose building. And when the king came, He said, man, this is lovely. And the elders gave a lot of the credit to the youth, saying, we owe this to the youth for seeing this opportunity and incorporating us, and the youth quickly realized, hey, even though elders may not seemingly be needed, you don't know until you need them. So in Baba Oyekun Meji, it speaks of why elders are the ones who always give their seal of approval to the youth. So whether it's an Ifa apprenticeship like myself and my godfather, right? Even though at times I felt like, hey, I could probably do this on my own, until I was absolutely sure I got that seal of approval from him, I never did, regardless of how much it costs, time, money, resources, whatever, because it's all about guaranteeing a positive result, especially as you're building yourself up. So very important. Baba Oyekun Meji also speaks of the importance of studying Ifa on any of the various levels possible. Because in this Odu, it speaks of when the Babalawo would perform, multiple consultations a day, and he was very exhausted. And he went to Orunmila to complain, and Orunmila said, this is Ifa work. Either you do it or you don't do it. I don't know what to tell you. And the guy said, well, I'm going to try my hand at farming. That other guy, he's doing very well farming. So he started farming. But he started realizing that farming wasn't going as well for him, and it was very taxing work. And he started actually missing, doing Ifa readings. But when he tried to reestablish it, it wasn't really, people weren't coming back to him because they felt abandoned by him. He went running back to Orunmila to tell him, like, hey, I think I messed up. I should have stayed at Babalawo. And Orunmila looked at him and said, 100 hours on the mat is better than 1 minute in the field. Where Ifa said, no matter how difficult it becomes to perform divination or a bow or whatnot, it's always a much more tax-free life than being a farmer or being a laborer. And the Babalawo quickly realized it doesn't matter what we do in life, if you have a job, it's not always going to be enjoyable. You're going to hit that plateau, and there's going to be moments where you're like, man, I really don't want to do this anymore. But it's a job. So he started his Ifa practice again. He made the offerings, and people started coming back in droves, and he didn't complain anymore. And I think that's really key. I think when we look at our culture and we look at the current state of things, I think it's always important to recall that it seems that people aren't as excited about Ifa or Orisha-centric work anymore or lifestyle anymore. Where you look at some of the people who have certain positions of influence and whatnot, and it could be misconstrued that they're frustrated with the life that Orunmila has given them or the Orishas have given them. Not realizing that, you are selected to perform a very, honorable position within nature, being a representative of these energies. And, there couldn't be anything worse than not accepting or appreciating that. So it's very important that if you're in a space where you're able to have an Ifa practice or anything that you do, just be appreciative of any way that you're able to provide for your family, which is Oyekun Meji says. There's no reason to complain because everybody, has an issue. But going back to what this Odu originally states, Oyekun Meji came down from heaven exhausted. It speaks of somebody that even though they may be seemingly young, they come down with an old soul. So it speaks of all those different things.
That's you.
Yeah, right? But
yeah.
I'm still...
You're young, but you're old.
I'm still moving around. I'm still mobile. In the Odu of Baba Oyekun Meji, it speaks of a story where a king passed away. He was one of the kings of Oyo. And his son, the prince, became king. Divination was performed where this Odu was revealed, where Ifa said that he needed to perform the sacrifice of 16 rams in honor of his father's Egungun spirit. But the prince, rather than getting to business, decided to enjoy his newfound position. And he started partying and enjoying life. And rather than offering the rams, he decided he was going to throw this huge drumming in honor of his father, which wasn't necessarily the wish at that moment. So the day of the drumming came, and Baba Oyekun Meji decided once again to become heavily inebriated and, make somewhat of a fool of himself, where the spirit of the father became very annoyed by basically the scene that was playing out in front of him, where an Eshu known as 𝘃cie𝗂𝗋 decided to bring the prince to the other side to be able to speak to his father. And when they were in front of each other, the prince said, "Father, don't you love what I've done for you? Look at this beautiful drumming I've done in honor of Egungun. This is the first time this has ever been done." And he said, "Son, I appreciate the drums, but what I don't appreciate is you haven't fed me, and you're drunk. So where do we go from here?" And the son, rather than going along with it and saying all the things he should have said at that moment, like, "I'll do what you say," or, etc., he gave a lot of pushback. And when the son thought he was going to go back to the world of the living, he ended up staying in the world of the ancestors with his father. He actually dropped dead at the tambol. So this Odu was actually where the drums of Egungun, or the Bata drum, was dedicated to Egungun, first manifested. It's one of the few Orishas that's completely identified with this drum, along with Shango. But this Odu speaks of the importance of making sure we have the boring stuff done first before, we have a party. And Oyekun Meji speaks of the importance of maintaining a certain decorum when it comes to drum functions or public functions within Ifa and Orisha, to be able to avoid any type of embarrassment whatsoever. So all of that is within this Odu. So what do you think, Phil?
Very, very interesting to learn about 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗁 and all these other things. I think people will definitely get a lot out of this one, especially when we have, 256 of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a long way to go. I actually go with one more pataki before we go ahead and close out. There's another story here in Baba Oyekun Meji that speaks of two brothers, where this Odu says the person has to be very careful with siblings and things of that nature, because they were going to go into business with each other, but one became drastically jealous of the other because the other had a special relationship with the Orisha Olokun, who was actually going to help the business because they were going to be fishermen and things like that. And Olokun saw the treachery in the other brother's heart and found out about a plot where the other brother, the treacherous brother, was going to kill the righteous brother and throw him in the ocean. And Olokun didn't want to see that. Some people would say Olokun was even their father. So when this was about to happen, Olokun actually drowned the treacherous brother so he couldn't kill the righteous one. And the righteous one was completely caught off guard. He said, "Why'd you kill my brother?" He said, "Because you didn't realize he was about to kill you," which was very heartbreaking for the one that survived. But Olokun actually gifted him salt, where a bow was performed with salt and whatnot, and that's actually where salt basically penetrated ocean water. So Oyekun Meji is the reason we have salt water and why certain fish prefer fresh to salt water and all of these different things. So another big theme here was the fish. So it's an Odu of commerce. It's an Odu that explains a lot about nature in general, and a lot of explanations about things that were around and gone far before we were ever here. So guys, I hope you really enjoyed the video about Baba Oyekun Meji. We got any shout outs, Phil?
Of course we do.
There we
This
go.
is the favorite part of the show.
Yeah.
Where we get to show love to the people who show love to you. So if you guys are wondering what this music is coming from, it's our elevator music. And there's a little button right under the video that says join, and that gives you access to 3 separate tiers, all offering different perks. So let's show some love to some super fans here.
Here we go.
We got Jesus Seha,
Yeah,
or Jesus
Jesus,
Seha.
bendiciones.
We got Fair, that's their name, just Fair.
Very nice.
All
That's
right,
fair.
This one could be a potential winner for best name.
Okay.
We got Bobani Boom Soto.
Okay, I can't repeat that. That's awesome.
Oh, okay. All right, we got Hemp Lord.
Yeah, oh man.
All right, and some VIBs. We
Yeah.
got Ogun B.
Very nice, my
We
brother.
got Keys by 𝗃𝗃𝗃.
Oh, thank you.
We got Titus, and we got Ifa J-Day.
Guys, we really appreciate you. Botánica.candlesandmore.com is up and running for all your spiritual services, needs, and goods. We ship worldwide. You can catch the podcast on all major platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. And until next time, see the light.